Hey everybody, welcome back. Truth or Danger, Doug. Got Tony Ranucci. He works inside the food industry as an independent broker. One of the things we've been talking about is some things that have come up with the government doing a government-private partnership in industry, which is basically not what we're really used to. That's usually seen in socialist and communist countries. And Tony and I, I'm going to let him speak to this, but it basically is going to break down how the government's getting involved in industry and some of the things he's seeing on the initial steps that are happening. So without further ado, Tony, welcome to the show again, man. Great seeing you.
Appreciate you having me back on. Always a pleasure.
So what are the things you're seeing with the public-private partnership? A couple of things you told me were extremely alarming. And I don't think a lot of people really understand, because it also lays out some of the, I guess you could say, things we're seeing with the southern border, and it kind of ties in with that.
It certainly does. And, I wasn't aware of the depth of this until I was talking with one of my regional managers. One of the largest cold salad and side dish producers in the country, if not the largest, has entered into a public-private partnership through the HB2 visa program, where they are employing, so far they've hired 160 illegals that hold these visas and put them on their production line. And through this program, the worker is going to get $18 an hour. They're going to get their transportation. They're going to get their housing. This is all paid for with tax dollars through this visa program. And my producer gets the benefit of the labor. And, with the labor shortages that we're seeing right now, and that, that's kind of been manipulated by the government as well, and both on the local and the federal level. My producer will typically pay between $8 and $12 an hour for a production worker. And they're held to a standard. They have to produce in order to maintain the job. And when you have Circle K's and convenience stores and retail grocery stores that are offering $15 an hour with a $1,000 sign-on bonus, it's real easy for someone in production and food service to say, okay, I don't want to slaughter chickens anymore for $8 an hour. So I'm going to go and clerk at the grocery store, and I'm going to make 15, and I'm going to put $1,000 in my pocket as a sign-on bonus. So what that's resulted in is a shift away from the production aspect on food service in particular, because it's not a pleasant job. I mean, it's hard work, it's long hours, and typically it's in a very cold environment. So we've seen a drop in employment on our side. And this was a perfect way, in my producer's eyes, to get those employees back and to have the government foot the bill. So it's a win-win for them. And the government is able to funnel these people around the countries to facilities like this. And our tax dollars are footing the bill on that. And not a lot of people, like you said, not a lot of people know it. And my concern about this, and I haven't done a lot of deep dive yet because I just found out about this with this one producer. I want to talk to my other producers and see how many of them are taking advantage of this, because I know that all of them are in a bad situation as far as production employees on the floor that are running these lines. So I just thought it was real interesting that they were so quick to enter into a government partnership. And I'm sure if you deep dive into it, there are regulations set out by the government that you have to qualify to have these employees in your facility.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. When you're talking about the requirements, there's going to be a lot of stipulations, and because of the amount of people they're bringing over, and they also want their vote, right?
Yep.
And it's usually not a conservative cause. So basically, what we're seeing is them bringing them in, and the stipulations from stuff I've been hearing is the stipulations, and I'm trying to get detailed sources where I can post that. But basically, the gist of what I was told was the stipulations are you can hire, you can have these people, but they have to be on the H-1B program.
Right.
That's it. You can't hire anybody else, because we're not going to subsidize that. We're not going to help you with that. So that's probably one of the biggest things. And then, of course, a lot of these companies were already going to go basically under. And I mean, that's what you were just basically explaining. They're about to go under because they can't hire anybody. Now they're being funded with these people coming across the border, the illegal aliens. So now all of a sudden what we have is it's like it's helping the company, but at the same time, what's the cost long term when it comes to the voting demographics? It's not just voting demographics. People can talk about that, but it's the change in America, and the people that should have been working have basically been replaced.
Correct. You're seeing a cultural shift. I mean, the people that are coming, they've got different values than we do. They come from different backgrounds than we do. And typically in immigration back in the 1900s, my grandparents immigrated over here. I'm second generation born in the States. You assimilated, you adopted the culture that you joined. And we're not seeing that now. We're not seeing English classes being taught to the immigrants. We're seeing Spanish classes being taught to American citizens. And that concerns me. The other thing, and this is speculation on my part, but I'd be willing to bet with the environmental oversight board that they just put in place, if your company doesn't adhere to certain policies and practices that the government advocates, you're probably not going to be eligible for this program. And this is going to tie back into ESG. If your company's not got a high ESG score, I'd be willing to bet that you're not going to be able to benefit from this free labor. Okay, so it's gonna force a lot more companies to go woke, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, one of the things I was going to say real quick, because you brought up ESG, and this is just for the viewers out there. If you don't understand what ESG is, it's probably one of the most critical things you need to understand now, and it's the environmental social governance. And environmental social governance, what Tony's talking about, is where the government is going to basically say, hey, you're going to do things our way. It's going to be very green initiative, and it's going to be in line with the environment. And, for example, in a meat packing plant, a lot of them, some of them are already looking at possibly repurposing for plant-based protein, because if not, they're going to be penalized by the government because they are producing, for example, beef or chicken that is not part of the green plant. So yeah, Tony, go ahead. Yeah.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I saw a disturbing trend in the beef industry in particular, and I'd be willing to bet this is all kind of intertwined. We have culled more of our beef herd than we ever have in the past, not at an alarmingly higher rate, just about maybe 8%. But if you look at the amount of heifers that were culled compared to the historical culling of this, it's about 30% more. And what that tells me is that these ranchers, they're culling their breeding stock. So they see the writing on the wall, and they're going to reduce the size of their ranches, or they're going to get out of ranching altogether and throw that investment into this green initiative, plant-based, lab-grown meat, because they see that that's going to be what's going to be forced upon us. That's one of the most disturbing things that I see on the beef side of things. Now, on the pork side of things, it's the same way. We're slaughtering more sows now than we ever have, and that reduces your breeding stock. So to me, knowing what I know in the food service industry, consumption's at an all-time high. Why would you cull your herds back and reduce your capacity to breed? It makes no sense. And that's on the environmental side of it. When you look at the social side of ESG, you're going to be forced to adopt policies that fit the liberal narrative. You're going to have a diverse workforce. You're going to have policies in place that promote certain sectors of the society over others that have been deemed not worthy. So it's not going to be a merit-based system. It's going to be based on the color of your skin and your sexual identity. Okay, and that concerns me as well, because what that's going to lead to is it'll lead to a decline in production, because your people that are doing the work, and they're doing it well, and they've been there, they're tenured, they know how to do their job, and they're getting it done, they're going to be passed over for promotions. Their raise is not going to be as much as the person that just came on board next to them. And that's going to create some dissent among the workforce, I think. And I think you'll see some of these tenured employees, if they've got the ability to retire, I think you'll see them do it. If they don't, I think you'll see them move to another sector of the industry where they're not going to be discriminated against. So the social part of this is just as concerning as the environmental.
Wow. Yeah, and that's one of the things I think you and I had gone back and forth with this morning. There's some stuff on Twitter, but we're basically saying, hey, look at global, was it Agenda 2030?
Yep.
And the global reset. If you look at those plans they have, I mean, they're out there, they're telling you what they plan on doing. If you were to look at 2030 and what their plan is and then work backwards, it basically, all you're doing is going backwards and saying, okay, if you were to get everything in place, this is where we're at here. And the next steps coming up, obviously aren't looking too well. What are you seeing? I know the next thing we wanted to talk about was the diesel shortage.
Yeah, it's excuse me. I've seen several projections. I saw a story on the Pilot and the Love's gas stations are issuing warnings to truckers, and this seems to be primarily on the East Coast. They're telling the truckers that before you go into these coastal states that are going to be affected, and it looks largely to be the Southeast and the Mid-Atlantic, they're telling them either to make sure you've got enough fuel to get out or simply don't go. We're fast approaching $6 a gallon down here for diesel. And when you've got a 750 gallon tank, that puts a big nut in the pocket right there when you fill this truck up. One of the things I've seen personally in food service, I'm having a lot of problems getting wheels under freight. Okay. A lot of my producers will put their product into a cold storage facility, typically in the Midwest, where the distribution points will drive their trucks to the cold storage. They'll pick the product up, or they'll hire a driver, an LTL guy, to go and pick it up. And these guys, if I've got a producer that's sending 3 pallets into a cold storage for pickup to go into a point of distribution, that's not going to make the driver a lot of money. Okay. So he's going to opt to take a full load, a 40,000 pound load, or even a 3/4 load, instead of taking his time to go to a separate storage facility, burn that fuel, pick up those 3 pallets and bring it back to distribution. So, I'll have POs that can typically sit in a cold storage facility for weeks without ever getting picked up. I was dealing with 2 issues today on product that was not available, going into large leveraged multi-unit chains. These were more manufacturing related than communication related, but I've got several industry partners that have seen those types of supply chain orders. I've got one guy that does import. If you're doing imported products, you're screwed, because typically what happens is it'll come in, it'll get put on a rail car and go into Chicago for clearing. Well, the Chicago rail yard got incredibly clogged up. They were parking cars way outside the yard. No one was monitoring temperature, and these cars were sitting there with frozen product in them for weeks and weeks on end. So luckily, the guy that runs this one company, he imports from Italy, and he was a logistics guy in his previous life, and he was able to contact CSX executives directly, and they were able to help him reroute and redistribute everything on coastal facilities rather than taking it into the middle of the country, and that saved him. Had it not been for that, he would have evaporated in the marketplace. So the other thing people have to understand is, with this diesel shortage, think further than the products on your shelf. Okay. Diesel powered vehicles are bringing gas to the pump. They're bringing coal to the electrical generating plants. Okay. As those prices skyrocket to get those commodities into those users, they got to pass that on to you. If the shortage happens because they simply can't get there for the lack of fuel on the East Coast, you could see some problems with the electrical grid. And there's several people that are predicting that going into the summer, when we get into peak demand, that we're going to see some blackouts and some brownouts, especially in the states that rely heavily on solar and wind, because we're just not there yet. I would love to be there on a green perspective. I would love nothing better than a cheap renewable source of energy. We're just not there yet. So that's going to become a factor, not just in food service, but everywhere that you go.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up with the shortages, because there's been people saying they're looking at possible electrical outages.
Yes.
During the summer months because of the lack of fuel and the energy that's going to be needed for the electrical plants.
Correct. And when you look at, for instance, and I'll tie this back to food service directly. If you're in a southern state, you've got a cold storage facility, and it's the middle of August, and it's 105 degrees, and you get a blackout or a brownout, and you don't have the diesel fuel to put in your backup generator, your warehouse is at risk. And we're talking facilities that are hundreds of thousands of square feet of refrigerated and frozen storage. So you can look at the amount of product that is at risk of being destroyed should the power go out and there's no diesel to power those generators. Okay. The other component of that, and again, we're going back to that bicycle wheel where all the spokes are interlaced. As that price of diesel continues to skyrocket, the price of keeping that place going also goes up, which means they've got to pass that on as well.
You know, I think just last week it's been 40 cents just in gasoline. The price is
Yes.
per gallon. All right. And you and I've talked about solutions. I know what I try to tell people as far as solutions, right? What is your advice? I mean, you're obviously seeing it from the ground level in the food industry. So what is Tony's advice? What would be your recommendation to the viewers out there? You know, obviously stocking up, but I mean, what is your take?
At this point, I'm not sure you're going to be able to rely on your freezer for long-term storage. Because again, as we get into the summer months, if we experience blackouts, your freezer goes down for a couple of days, you're done. Everything that's in there is done. You're either going to have to preserve it, can it, or throw it away. I think we're to the point where you need to look at a stockpile of survival food, of dehydrated food. I think you need to have at least a month's backup to make sure that you're secure. Get to know a local farmer, okay? Barter with that farmer. If you've got a skill or you produce a product, barter with that farmer for the goods that he produces that you need. Okay. These local guys are going to get hit hard. The mega farms, they're going to get hit hard, but they're able to bounce back because of the money they've got put in the bank. Local farmers are on a shoestring. Okay. The producer bears all of the brunt of getting that product to market. Okay. So until he sells it, he doesn't see any return whatsoever. But if you've got a skill set, if you're a mechanic that knows how to work on it, you might have a skill that you can barter.
I think that's pretty key. That's one of the things. I think I put out something this morning and was on some phone calls and we were all talking and I spoke to somebody, said they actually gave me that advice. They said, listen, get to know your butcher. Get to know the farmer, the people producing around you, and start shopping local as much as you can. Stop using the big box stores, because what's going to happen is going to set up relationships for you, and they're, talk to them and say, hey, I've got some skills, do you need a hand? Even if it's just hammering nails to fix fences. I mean, I've had people tell me that. They said, yeah, they don't have the money to pay all the time to keep up their property. But if you were to come out there and do simple things to help somebody, they're going to pay you back tenfold.
Oh, absolutely. And you're not going to be able to do that with a liberal arts degree. Okay. If you've got a skill set that you learned from a trade or you learned from a profession, you've got a lot more to trade to somebody that can provide you a service than someone who has majored in gender studies. Okay.
No, that's absolutely true. What are you seeing with have you seen anything with the fishing industries?
The constraints on the fishing industry and the push to go, once again, to go sustainable and to go green have really ramped up on that industry. A lot of the product that I deal with directly are coming out of Indonesia and the Asian Pacific, and they have their own set of problems. I've got one company that focuses almost solely on squid, calamari. There is none. We were told don't sell it. We don't have it to do. And because of the EPA regulations and the fishery regulations here in the States, the domestic products all but gone.
Wow. That's and this kind of fits back. I know one of the last thing we wanted to talk about was I know we were talking about things at the local level and making sure you can basically get involved locally and, kind of keep an eye on the local politicians, because a lot of the government money that was coming down, but there's also people that are moving into the towns. And you were telling me about one of them is, what is it, Siler City?
Siler City, North Carolina. I've got one of my producers has a facility in Siler City. Siler City is a very small town. And the demographic, like so much of small town America, Main Street has been ravaged by big box. Walmart, Target, Sam's Club, all of this. There's no Main Street grocer anymore in these small towns. They all have to go to the Walmart to get their product. So you've seen a decimation of small town, which has resulted in some poverty. low wages, and people that are hurting. And when you get that, you get the guys with the drugs that come in and they prey upon these people and take what little they have left. So we saw a group come into Siler City. It was 4 individuals. One was allegedly a billionaire. These guys were there for about 3 months, and all 3 of them ran for office. The billionaire's sitting in the shadows somewhere bankrolling this. So these guys come in. One's running for a district seat. Another one's running for an at-large seat, and one's running for mayor. And they came in, they badmouthed the current leadership in the town and started promising the world to these people within the city limits. Now, again, the city limits, those are the guys that are voting in these elections, and they're hurting. The suburbs around are where the affluent are that don't have the opportunity to vote in the city elections. Okay, but they're still subject to some of the policies that are put forth and some of the things that are brought to the town by the city council and the mayor. These guys promised to bring in as many as 100,000 well-paying jobs, and they formed a block of candidates. The town got upset, and they started fighting back, pushing back, looking around at these guys. And it turns out the billionaire is not a billionaire. He doesn't show up on any list in North Carolina of being wealthy. Nobody knows who he is, where he came from. And it's a coordinated effort to do a hostile takeover of Siler City, North Carolina.
Yeah,
And
I'm looking at it right here. Chatham News and Record, Unity Block pledges prosperity, but raises red flags for some.
indeed,
This is, people, if you're seeing this, just look this up and start reading it. The article details these 4 gentlemen that went into this town. And if you look at it, they're very young. They look like they were basically put up to this, to go in and basically try to flip a town. And
That's
this is basically, yeah, and this is basically what I've seen going on, and I've heard about going on out west. I mean, obviously we know it happened in a lot of places, but it's still going on. And the funny thing is, because we're seeing this as towns raising the alarm, the thing that gets me about this is what, if you listen to General Flynn, he was talking about it, Steve Bannon, and a whole bunch of other people, they're saying you have to get involved locally. Because strategically at the national level, if we see what's going on, we're not going to change it. And in all honesty, I just don't see that changing. But at the local level is where we need to take charge, so we can, obviously, if the federal level was to come down, especially like in the states and counties, you can say, no, we're not going to do that.
And the perfect example of that, Doug, is what happened in Texas with the school boards. Every conservative candidate that was going up against a proponent of CRT in their education system was replaced. The conservative candidates swept every election for school board in Texas. And I've said for a long time that the 2 most valuable elections you'll ever vote for in your life is your mayor and your school board, because that's what shapes the policy of what your children are being taught and the policies that are implemented in your city. So, and you're absolutely right. We have very little effect on what happens at the federal level, but we can shake it up on a local level in a great big way. And that would be my advice. Get involved, get to know your candidates, get to know where they're from, know their background, and hold them to the fire. Call them out in public. Go to your school board meetings, even if you don't have children. That affects the way you're going to live going forward. So go to those meetings and be active.
Yeah, definitely, man. I just want to say thanks for being on the show. We definitely covered, 3 good topics, and kind of like how they tie into each other, because it's going to be extremely important going forward. There's some other stuff that popped up on the news today. I'm going to be covering that on the next episode, guys. To all you viewers out there, please stay tuned, because we got a lot coming up. Tony, I just want to say thanks, because the way we were able to break it down and tie everything in together, and like you were saying, get involved locally with the farmers also, the growers, get to understand them, try to develop relationships, the farmers markets, those are perfect places.
Absolutely, they are. And I'll go a step further. Get to know your neighbors. Start a co-op garden in your neighborhood. That's been a big thing here in South Carolina on the Low Country forever. You've got entire homeowners associations that are behind these co-op gardens, and they're planting dozens and dozens of acres that are for the homeowners' use only. So there's a lot of things you can do to help stay this off. But I will tell you this, brother, it's coming. And by the time the summer harvest comes in, you're gonna see some real pain.
Yeah, most definitely.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Doug. I hope you have me back. I try not to get too political in this thing, but what I'm seeing going on the political side of things, maybe we can discuss that on another show.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate it. And, I understand. I mean, sometimes it's just really hard to keep it out because just the decisions are being made. So, but yeah,
So,
definitely.
yep.
But yeah,
Everything's
now you're getting ready to take a couple days off, go fishing. Am I correct?
that is correct. Absolutely. I can't wait.
All right. Well, you have a good time. Don't drink too much beer and safe travels.
I'm a whiskey guy, but I'll take your advice.
All right. You take care.
Thanks, Doug.
Bye-bye.